Hi, everyone. I am so excited that you're joining me today. And I have my favorite guest that I've ever had in my whole time back with me again because it is my daughter, Haley Lancaster. But she was on my 14th episode, which was about bullying. And that was 3 years ago, which is so crazy to me. And she and I cannot believe that I've been doing this for 3 years. And I never run out of things to talk about. But the reason that I'm having her today, when we talked about bullying 3 years ago, I feel like this is part of the story of today, but only maybe, a little bit of the part of the story. And we can go back into that. But if you want to know more about the bullying stuff, you can go back and listen to that episode. But today, I wanted to talk about her perspective with growing up with anxiety and having anxiety now. Because since my rebrand, I am the anxiety coach. And it was so funny because I didn't want to choose that as who I was for a long time. And then when I finally let it sink in that I should be the teen anxiety coach, all the stuff from the past came up in my mind. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm the perfect person to be the teen anxiety coach because my daughter has had anxiety her whole life, but we didn't even know it. And now we know it. She has this whole adult perspective about it. And so we're going to talk about that today and also talk about what parenting worked for her, and what parenting didn't work for her. And I want her to be totally honest because this is good information for parents who are listening. And it's good information for teens because maybe they can come up, like if something's not going right in how they're being parented right now with anxiety, that gives them some words that they can talk to their parents about. So, hello, Haley. Do you have anything you want to say at first before we get started?
No, I am excited to talk about this because yeah, it's been such a big part of my life. And I finally feel like now in I don't want to say my old age, but now that I'm older, I feel like I definitely feel like I have it figured out. So
Oh, good. And you're
after,
also, in the mental health space, or you're not really practicing a lot of mental health stuff with others right
right.
now. Though I think no matter what jobs we ever have in our lives, knowing mental health things is helpful. And you probably are using it a lot and you're just maybe not even realizing it.
Yeah, I think that's just my life.
But I didn't know that you had anxiety your whole growing up life. And I really, even in your college life, until you were diagnosed by a therapist, I still just kept thinking that it wasn't true. So, when you look back onto your like earliest times, can you pinpoint what was in anxiety, what wasn't, when did it start? Do you know? Can you tell any of that?
Yes, I can. I remember my first panic attack very vividly because I remember it was the worst feeling I had ever had. And if you've had a panic attack, it is the worst feeling that you've ever had, I'm sure. But this is so silly. I don't remember. There was a time in my growing up when chicken soup, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. Chicken noodle soup for the teenage soul. Someone gave me that book as a gift. I don't remember. Those books were really popular when I was growing up. Anyway, it was full of stories from teenagers, and there was one about a girl whose mom died. And I remember reading that and having the realization, like, oh, my parents can just die at any point, and there's literally nothing I can do about it. And I remember reading that story and having a panic attack that night because I was like, oh, this is something I don't have any control over. And I think that manifested itself in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously, that, like I said, that night I had a panic attack, but I used to then start doing things to prevent that. And it was stuff that didn't make any sense. Like I had to have things in rainbow order. And if I did those things, then you wouldn't die.
Mm,
Um, or I would say in my head at the beginning of the day, okay, if I, you know, count every step that I take today, my mom won't die, which I think is like some OCD
mhm.
type behavior, but definitely all circulated around this anxiety that I could not prevent your death. That was my first huge fear. And I remember thinking, okay, if I'm with her, so if I'm at home and we're together, everything's fine. But
Mhm.
if she leaves, like when you would go to work in the morning, I was like, okay, there could be a car accident. She's not here. I can't prevent it. For some reason, I felt like if I was with you, I could prevent it, which super
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense, but
Mhm.
that's how I justified it in my mind. So yeah, all day when you were at work and I was at school, I was like, okay, she could die at any minute. And I mean, that's all I would think about. Like that
Mhm.
is truly what my mind spiraled to all the time.
Do you think
Um,
I that seems like when you were a little bit older, and I feel like it was 2nd grade-ish when you were throwing up every day. Were you thinking these things when you were throwing up every day, or was how was that?
Honestly, I do I think a lot of the illness type stuff, I think I don't know that I was having the thoughts yet of like these things could happen. Like my mom could die or somebody I care about could die. I don't think I equated it yet to the illness part. I do genuinely think that like I just had a stomach issue.
Oh,
Um I
okay. Well, and
which
that's good to know because I keep thinking, well, that was dumb that I didn't realize that, I always there was an excuse in my mind always about why, oh, she's allergic to red dye or she, whatever. I want to ask you a question about
yeah.
like one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the parenting, what parenting worked, what didn't work. And I remember, like, I haven't talked about this with in any of my podcasts or presentations about anxiety, but I remember when there was a night, and I don't know that this was the panic attack night. I don't know that you even told us that you had a panic attack because I didn't know you had panic attacks until you were in college.
I could not have told you that that was a panic attack until I learned more about it. Like,
Right. You didn't know
little I
what it
just
was.
thought I was crazy. Like,
But I remember one time you saying to me that you didn't want me to do something because I could die. Like, I think it was go somewhere or go on a plane, or I can't remember what it
mhm.
was, but I remember you saying, I don't want you to go because you could die. And I knew that I couldn't tell you, well, don't worry about it, I'll never die because that I don't have control over that
Yeah.
either. So I remember saying to you, "Well, Haley, if that happens, you'll figure it out. Like you'll be okay and people will
Mhm.
take care of you and I'm going to try my hardest not to die." I'm still saying that to you. Like I'm living to be 100 and I'm going to do everything I can to live to be 100. And but if I don't, you're gonna be okay. And I
Mhm.
remember telling you that, I feel like you were, like, 5th grade-ish. I mean, I'm trying to think about I feel like you were around 5th grade, and I do remember there were other things, like, all of a sudden you didn't wanna spend the night with people.
Mhm.
And I was like, "Well, why don't you wanna go spend the night?" It was even, like, with your cousins and stuff, and I was like, "Why
'Cause
don't
you
you
could
wanna go?"
die.
And and I remember you saying you didn't say I don't think you said that, you just said, "Well, I want you won't be able to kiss me goodnight, or you won't be able to," and maybe that was part of your rituals of, these things have to happen or whatever. But
Yeah.
I remember thinking for a short time, like, "Oh, no. I want her to go off into the world and be an independent human being. I don't want her to be clung to me all the time because I saw that as a school counselor where kids were too connected to their parents. I was like, "Ooh, I don't want that." And so I don't know if I reacted well or not. But tell me first of all, how did it feel when I said, well, I don't think I said I don't have control over that either, but I think I said, well, I don't know if I'm gonna die, but even if I did, you're gonna be okay. Was that helpful? Was that not helpful?
I mean, I think I remember this specifically because it was when you went to Las Vegas.
Oh,
I
okay.
and I remember being terrified. I was terrified of planes
Oh,
anyway
you know
because,
what?
like
I think that you were in 5th grade because I think we went to Las Vegas the month after September 11th when all those planes went into the buildings and stuff. So that probably even, more was your sensitivity was
Yeah.
heightened because you saw that on TV for days and days and
Mhm.
days of these planes crashing,
Yeah.
and then your mom's gonna get on one month later.
Yeah, and I already was afraid of planes because 'cause I'm like, "Wow, you super don't have control over anything, like, you're just,
Mhm.
you know, in the air." And so I remember that really vividly, like, I didn't want you to go because I was like, wow, this plane's just gonna crash and like there's nothing
Mhm.
I can do about it. But obviously, in a sensible person's brain, I think saying that would be helpful. But I think because in your anxiety brain, nothing like that doesn't help. Like that
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense to me. Like, well, you,
What
I
what
have
do
to,
parents say though? Like, because you can't say, "I'm not gonna
I
die,"
know.
because there's no way nobody has control over that. So I don't know, I'm trying to think what would be so helpful to hear in that situation.
I mean, I truly think I think you said the right thing because, yeah, you don't want to lie. And the idea that there were people there to catch me was helpful. Like, yes, because you and dad went on the plane. So if the plane went down, you both would be gone. Like, there would
Mhm.
not be a
Mhm.
dad then to just take care of me. And so I think knowing that, like, there were people, and I think I remember when you went to Las Vegas, all of the childcare of me was split between grandparents. And I think I stayed with Aunt Susan. And I think being around those people that were close was helpful because I think they understood like Haley's a little bit weird and like it's going to be weird this whole time that they're gone. And I remember, I think it was Grandma Joyce. I was waiting the day that you were coming home. I remember sitting on the front porch waiting to see your car come around because I was like, I have to know that she's okay. And I think I sat outside for like 2 hours. And I
Oh gosh.
remember, I remember Gma just sat with me, and that was helpful. Like the
I
fact that
think she has anxiety too, though, so
Mhm.
she probably got kind of what you were going through.
I think
Mhm.
so many people in our family have anxiety, but I don't think nobody wants to admit that they're thinking these crazy things. I remember I never wanted to tell anybody because
Mhm.
I I thought like people are gonna really I everyone already thought I was weird. Like I didn't need more people thinking like, oh, well, you're weird because you're thinking these crazy things.
But you and I
Mhm.
are really close, and we always talked
Mhm.
about everything, like and I feel like and you can tell the truth, but I
Mhm.
feel like I always had an open, safe space for you to talk about anything because I knew how
Mhm.
important it was. Did that help, or do you still feel like you didn't wanna tell me because I'm your mom, or
I felt like I've always felt like I could tell you anything. Like that is one of the beautiful things about our relationship. I think more so because it was such this overarching thing. Like I was thinking about it every day. Like talking to you about it every day would not have helped me. I
Mm,
was more about like this is happening at school. This person's being crazy. I'm being, people are teasing me about this. Like I feel like I talked more about those things because like when I was with you, that stuff was in the background. Like if you were
mm,
home, if I was home, if it was generally a regular school day, I was okay. And so when I got home, I was like, well, she's totally fine. I can talk about anything else now.
mm,
Um, because I did think when you came home, I would just turn it off
okay.
because I knew you were there. So I didn't
Yeah.
have to worry about it. So that, I mean, probably wasn't on my fifth grade brain
Do you
mind.
think that was your main worry, or do you think you were worrying about other things too?
There are sections of my life I can tell you what I was worried about.
Okay.
So, like when I was the littlest me, so I want to say, gosh, when did I read Chicken Noodle Soup for the Teenage Soul? I don't know why that was so prominent, like that moment. Those
I
books
didn't know those books were so
they were
damaging.
supposed to help people and they totally didn't. It's funny that that was the book that ruined my life anyway. So
Mm,
like from first grade, probably through fifth or sixth grade, it was my mom is going to die and how am I going to prevent that? And then from sixth grade to, gosh, probably sophomore year, it was about like, it was a lot about friendships, like having anxiety about friendships. I do think my anxiety died down at that point, and I don't know if it's because my brain was going through so many changes, like it couldn't keep up with the anxiety part, so it kind of like put that to the side. But I remember Like specifically around, Carrie's house burned down and then she was in that terrible car accident. I remember being really anxious about friends, like, oh, my friends could die, which is something I really wasn't in the realm of possibilities for me because we're all
Mhm.
so young. Like
Yeah. And
I
you didn't
wouldn't
know
have
any
thought
young
about,
kids
yeah.
that yeah.
Um, so like I said, not as anxious during that time, but I think also because there was a lot of school drama, like that was weighing heavy on my mind. Also, that was when I started getting crushes on boys, and so my
Mhm.
brain was super occupied with. But I remember when I was a junior, and this is another like core memory. I went to church camp with Carrie. I think it was that summer before junior year. And I, if you've ever been to church camp, obviously there's like sermons all day, every day. And there was a sermon that someone gave about this youth pastor. And this youth pastor was like so full of like, these are not people that I knew other than Carrie. Like, I'm just hearing from strangers' perspectives on this. But anyway, they had this youth pastor and he was so full of life and he was going to do all these amazing things. And he had a brain aneurysm at a party and died.
Mm.
And I remember, first of all, they talked vividly about what happened,
Mm.
which I A, didn't know that was something that could happen, but B, it can just kill you at any time and you're just dead and like you can't do anything about it. And so for, oh my God, years of my life, probably from junior year until midway through college, I worried about that every single day. And that's when my sleep got really bad. That's when I was like, I have a serious problem. Like, I can't function like this. And I remember it was one of those things. I also have anxiety that if you speak something into existence, it will happen. So I
Mm.
couldn't tell anybody because
Mm.
if I said it out loud, then it would happen.
Mm.
And I don't give words that power anymore, but I did.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking, so many people that I know that had, a brain aneurysm and died. I remember thinking like, oh, it happens at night, so I just have to stay awake because
Mm.
that'll prevent it from happening. So
Mm.
my freshman year, I remember in the dorms, I would go up to my bunk, my little top bunk, and I would just look out the window and worry all night long. Like if I had the slightest headache, well, I'm gonna die. So I have to get my stuff in order. Like I have to get ready that I'm because there's nothing I can do about it. And I remember like I can still picture looking at the like four-way stop outside of my dorm room every night and just being like, am I gonna die now? Is it happening now? Is it gonna happen now? Like,
Mm.
and that's when I was like, oh, people don't function like this. Like my roommate was just like snoozing away, and I'm like, I don't think I should feel like this.
Mhm. And you were diagnosed I feel like it was after you graduated from college, but was it before that?
So I went to therapy for the first time for all of these issues when I was in college, because that's when they were like, oh, you have high blood pressure, just FYI, which I was super anxious about. A lot of my anxiety at that point was around like health. So obviously, yes, having a brain aneurysm, but also like any other number of terrible things that could happen, like bacterial meningitis, because everyone's like, oh, well, that's super prominent at colleges. And I'm like panicking about that. And
Mm.
so just anything that could happen health-wise, I was panicked about. So that's when I started going to the doctor regularly. But I also was like, I have to go to therapy. Like I cannot function. I cannot not sleep
Mhm.
and also go to college. Like college is hard enough.
Mhm.
So yeah, I started going to therapy at that time because there's a lot of other things going on in my life that I was anxious about, specifically just around like parents
Yeah.
and
Well, and we got divorced when you were a senior in
Mhm.
high school.
Yes.
So then well, I guess you were a junior in high school
Mhm.
because I moved away when you were a senior in high school. And so there was a lot of, I'm sure a lot, well, the one panic attack that I remember that I went to college to help you with, I feel like was around that stuff because it was, you were talking about your dad.
Yes, I mean, I feel like that was like a mental breakdown at that point. Like
I
I
felt like it was too, because I was the worst that I had ever seen you, but, I said, "Oh, well, Haley needs to get off birth control pills. That's why this happened."
which I
Like
I do think that was part of it. Like that being on birth control messed so much with my hormones and my emotions. I hate that that's like the cure all for anyone having, I mean, obviously, if you're having sex, that's like the number one thing they say. But if you're having bad acne, if you're having bad cramps, it's just like, oh, here, take this birth control. But it's so it messes with your brain so much. And for some people, it's beautiful and great. I know people that have been on birth control for a million years and it's been perfect and they're having a great time. It made me feel like a different person. Like I felt like I had no control over anything that was happening. Like
Mm,
I could see myself doing things and I'm like, that is out of control behavior, but I couldn't stop myself. Like it was bizarre. But
mm.
yes, I think that contributed for sure. So yeah, it
I
was
just
not a
think
good
as a
idea for me to be
parent,
there.
you know, I I just kept explaining it away as all these other things. I never It's not that I think anxiety is terrible, I just didn't want you to have it. I didn't want you to have anything wrong with you. I just
All
want
right.
I want you to just have this most perfect life, and I think because you're so outgoing, I thought, well, it can't be anxiety because she's not shy, she's not staying in her
Yeah.
room, she's not and so I was really confused about it, and I feel sad because as a mental health provider, I was totally not in tune with it, I guess. I mean, I could see it in other people, I could help other people with it. And I do think that when you love somebody and you're the parent of them or the sister of them or the romantic partner of them or whatever, it's hard for you
Mhm.
to see the things the way they really are because you don't want them
Yeah.
to be that way.
And
But
I also think though, mental health has changed so much
well, yeah, anxiety was
since
not a
I
thing
was,
for kids
yeah.
when you were little. Like nobody
And
said that.
and like I said, I could not have pinpointed that that's what it was until I was so much older.
Mhm.
Like when I was in college was when I really started to like think about stress and anxiety because obviously you have school stress. Like that was
Well,
always
yes.
there.
And everyone has anxiety. It's just
Mhm.
what level and how does it stop you from doing things and does it keep you up at night and all that kind of stuff is what makes it I keep calling it diagnosable. I don't even know if that's a thing, but like in all my podcasts about anxiety, I say everybody has it. Like I get anxious about things,
Mhm.
but I don't have diagnosable anxiety because I can turn the volume down and I can keep going forward
Yes.
and do the things that I want to do. And I remember when you first started working as a teacher, you told me, you were couldn't sleep and you were thinking about stuff all night. And I said, and was that health stuff or was that everything?
I mean, I think a lot of that had to do with repercussions of the divorce.
Mm,
I don't know how to talk about that, like,
yeah, I understand.
without being still like very angry, but not at
Mhm,
you.
I understand.
Um,
And even if it was me, that I can handle it.
I think a lot of that came from that at that point. I also, gosh, new teacher anxiety is a real thing.
Oh,
So feeling like I was not doing anything, even though I was like staying after school and grading all these papers, like they set you up for so much failure. No offense to the people that taught me about
mhm.
teaching. I still love those people, but I mean, you're made to feel like if you don't act or do things a certain way, then you're a bad teacher.
Yeah, because
And
I
so
got that same thing.
yes, I think a lot of that's just how you're made to feel. And so constantly feeling like I wasn't good enough. But
But I remember when you told me you started taking medication and you said, "Mom, I don't have to listen to that stuff in my head anymore." Like, I know you didn't I'm sure you didn't say it was gone, but
mhm,
it was quiet. It was
yes.
like it was turned down. That's the way I always think about it as volume. And I tell
Mhm.
all my clients, like, I'm going to teach you things. I mean, some people need medication to turn it down, but
And I
there are
certainly
also
did.
things that you can learn about calming your central nervous system and stuff that turn the volume down. And so that's
Mhm.
what so when you started taking medication, the volume got turned down. Did you notice right away that, "Oh, I feel so much better?"
It came at any, I think, medication. So I'm taking generic Lexapro, which is antidepressant, anti-anxiety meds, but and so they take a little bit of time to work. Of course, I think the placebo effect, I took the first pill and 2 minutes later, I'm like, I'm cured. I feel so much better. Like, this is great. I think it did take a couple of weeks, but I started noticing, and they teach you this, like, whenever, if you do medit, like I used the Calm app for a long time. And so when they talk about meditation on there, it's you let the thoughts come in, like you're not forcing them to not come in, but you let them come and go. And that's how it
Mm.
feels in my brain now. Like I'll have an anxious thought, but then I just let it go away, which is
Mhm.
not something I could have done before.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, and I think that there are people that have to have the medication in order to be calm enough to do the things.
and because I went to therapy for a long time as an adult to try to like get this figured out because I was like, well, talk therapy is what everyone says is like the end all be all. And I got a lot of, as my therapist would say, tools in my toolbox
Mhm.
about how to stop having some of those thoughts. And I did, some of those were really helpful. For example, stop getting on WebMD, stop
Mhm.
Googling things, stop it, like quit going there. And I really had to stop myself, like, because that was when I would start spiraling.
Mhm.
Um,
'Cause it always ends in you're going to die. I mean, like, the list
Absolutely.
is, like, all these little baby things and then
Yeah,
all the way to or death.
yeah, like, you
Mm,
should go to the hospital right now.
yeah.
Um, and so I got a lot of really helpful things, but I remember I went to my doctor and I was like, "Okay, I'm trying all this stuff and I'm still this isn't helping." Like, it's giving me these, like, tiny little bits of, like, a pause in my brain, but, like, I will still spiral. And so, yeah, they put me on Lexapro, and I've I've never looked back. I It literally changed my life. I remember the first day I was counseling, my first day as a school counselor at Robinson was the first day that I took it, and I had a full-blown panic attack on the way to school. Why am I doing this? Who signed me up to be a counselor? I don't know what I'm doing. I
Mhm.
should not have gotten this job. And I remember Matt and I drove to work together that day, and he was like, "Just take a deep breath." And he was like, "You know kids, you love kids, they are gonna love you, middle school is perfect for you, blah, blah, blah." And so I went in there, and the second I said hi to a kid, it all went away. Like, it drained out of my body, and I was like, "Oh, I know what I'm doing."
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember throughout the course of the day, I'm like I said, I'm sure it's placebo, but I was just like, "I'm not thinking about this stuff anymore."
Mhm.
And so, yeah, my first year of counseling, I was smooth sailing. I was like not worried about anything, which was probably great for my anxiety because I'm sure if I wasn't on meds, that first year would have been a
Mm.
nightmare.
Well, and I was gonna ask you because so many of the people that I talk to are like, "Oh, I got off my meds and then I got all mixed up." So you've never gone off of it.
In my brain, I know, like, it's been such a godsend for me that, like, I can't, when I got pregnant and they were like, some people stop taking them because, they're afraid it's going to affect their baby, or some people don't want it in their breast milk or anything like that. And I was like, I don't care. Like, the sanctity of my mental health right now is so important to me. If I had not been on medication and been pregnant, that would have been terrible. I
Mhm.
already have health anxiety, and they were already telling me, well, you have to be induced and you might have, preeclampsia and all this other stuff because you have high blood pressure. I, if I had not been on medication, that I would have heard all those things and literally lost my mind. Like,
Yeah.
and I remember pregnancy, this is like, could be a whole other podcast. Like,
Mhm.
the whole idea of, like, I have to go to a hospital and have all these things done to me, like,
Yeah.
and I don't have any control over it, like, I have to have a
Mhm.
baby. He's gonna
Mhm.
have to come out of there, like, I can't stop that from happening.
Well, and I think being a parent is anxiety producing
Oh
for
my
every single person because you get this baby and you're like, "Well, I don't know what to do with this thing," and then you have to keep it alive, and then
Yeah.
I remember and like I always say, I don't have diagnosable anxiety, but I remember when you were a baby, I was like, "Well, an iron could fall on her head and she could fly off this balcony," and, like, just I mean, like, there's so many things to worry about, and so now you have this beautiful baby well, he's not even a baby anymore, too. But so I wanted to ask you, and we really do I mean, we could talk for a
I
million hours, and
know.
I don't wanna do it, but as a parent now,
Mhm.
and you look at that little beautiful baby and, like, are you gonna be thinking about are you gonna be watching for anxiety signs or, like, what
Oh,
do you think you're
yeah.
gonna be doing?
I'm all ready. That's funny that you mentioned that because this week, every once in a while, like, it gets darker earlier, so he's awake when it's dark right now, and he'll look outside and he'll say, "It's dark, mama." And I'll say, "Are you afraid of the dark? Like, is that scary?" And he'll look at me and he'll just well, of course, he says yes to everything right now, so he's just like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Well," I said to you, "when you go to bed and you know your room is dark," I'm asking him all these questions about it, and he's just trying to do his own thing, like running away from me, and and I'm like trying to have this serious conversation with him. But I do think I'm tuned into a lot of that stuff. I think all the time about, my therapist said, you're a highly sensitive person and HSP, which is a thing. I do see, like, signs of that, which can, become anxiety later on, so I sense some of that in him, but I'm trying to just let him be his little self and, like,
Mhm.
not pre-diagnosing him before anything happens for real, but I do feel like I'm cognizant of it, and I'm constantly like, "I wanna know what you're thinking in your little brain." He probably
Yeah.
doesn't even know what he's thinking, he's just saying crazy stuff, but
Well, what was something that was not helpful to you as you were growing up that you wish wouldn't have happened? Well, don't you wish that the divorce didn't happen, but, like, was there techniques that I did or things I mean, I guess we can throw your dad in there too, but was there things that adults or parents specifically did that you were like, "That was not helpful?"
Nothing I can't think of anything that was like, "This was detrimental." I mean,
Mm.
obviously, people saying, like, "You should just, like, not worry about it," is
Mhm.
never helpful, but I had not expressed my, like, severe worry, I don't think, as a kid, and I don't know that you really can explain it
Mhm.
super well when you're a kid, but yeah, don't worry about it. I remember I remember one time I was worried about something, and I remember you said, "Sometimes I just don't think about that stuff," and I'm like, "My brain doesn't work that way." Like, I can't not think about it. And I think that was when I was older, but I think so, yeah, saying things like, "Just calm down, don't worry about it," not helpful. I think a lot of things that were helpful, you were always willing to just sit and listen to me. Um, and of course, like I said, I wasn't super forthcoming about, I am having thoughts of you dying constantly. Like, I wasn't saying that, but being able to talk about literally anything else, like everything that was happening at school, because that is such a big part of life when you're growing up.
Mhm.
Um, and knowing that I could share literally anything and with no judgment was helpful. I that is, like, my number one as a counselor seeing parents with
Mhm.
their kids, as long you can't judge them for a single thing. You
Mhm.
that is what will drive you apart more than
Mhm.
anything.
Mhm.
Um, and kids would always say, like, "I don't wanna talk to my mom because she thinks that's dumb, or she has said she doesn't like XYZ, and I was like, "You can't you just have to listen and go, mhm."
Yeah. Yeah, because you're gonna
Um,
hear things that you don't wanna hear. You told
yes,
me things that I didn't wanna hear.
the worst
Mm.
things, and, like, your
But
kids are gonna
I'm just like,
say
"Okay,
yeah.
tell me more about that."
Yeah, your
And
kids are
then
gonna
and
say to
sometimes I would say to you, probably more when you were an adult, but I think even because I always wanted to parent with you
mhm.
and not over you, I would say, I'm gonna put my mom hat on now." And that usually just meant I'm gonna give you advice, and I'm gonna tell you that I don't like this, or I'm gonna
Yeah.
tell you that this doesn't make sense to me, or I'm gonna tell you that I feel upset about it or whatever. But I always tried to do it in a way that was like, this isn't against you. It's just me saying how I feel about it too.
Mhm.
And I think that can help. I think that I was probably better at this than some just because I mean, I still to this day, my hackles will get up immediately when anybody like my parent, like my mom,
Mhm.
says things like, "Well, I don't like that," or, "Just read your Bible," or, you know what?
Mhm.
I just immediately feel angry because 'cause I'm like, "You're not listening to me."
Mhm.
And I remember that that was the number one reason why I was angry my entire growing up life was I thought, "You're not listening to me."
Yeah.
And I thought, "I am not gonna be that parent. I'm gonna
Yes.
listen to everything, and I'm gonna take it all in," and I'm also such an open person to everything in the world
Mhm.
that a lot of things don't bother me.
Yeah.
But that's because I don't take any of it personally, and I don't assume that because someone is choosing something that it means anything bad
Yeah.
necessarily. Like, I don't know. I mean, there's obviously things that you and your brother did that I was like, "I hate this so bad." But it doesn't mean that you're a bad person, and
Yeah.
it doesn't mean anything, and I think so many of the adults in my life thought that those choices also meant that person was bad,
Yeah.
and I never thought that, and I still don't think that. So and I think that's something that can be learned if there are parents out there that feel very
Mhm.
angry towards their kids about choices, that they could learn to take their personal preferences out of it
Yeah.
or and allow their child because I really believe that if we allow our children to have a safe space to talk about anything,
Mhm.
that they're gonna come up with the answers we want them to come up with
Yeah.
because there's no pressure to choose something else. And even if they are
Mhm.
choosing things that we don't agree with, they're gonna come to a clear understanding of it through the safety of
Uh-huh.
it being open.
Yeah. I used
Because
to
if they
I had kids in middle school when specifically when I was a counselor that would make not great choices. And I remember they would ask me, "Do you think I'm a bad kid? Like, you think I'm a bad kid?" And I always said, "You are wonderful. You are good inside. You made a bad choice. That doesn't mean you're a bad person."
Mhm.
And so I think just letting them know, like, there are bad choices. Like, you can make choices that are hurting people, hurting yourself. Those are not great choices, but you're never a bad person.
Mhm.
And I think I knew that when I was growing up. I just my brain didn't work right.
Mhm. Well, and I think we all our brains are mostly negative to ourselves,
Yeah.
like, "Oh, you're crazy, you're terrible, everyone hates you, you're ugly, you're fat, you're"
Mhm.
all these things, and that we can't stop that from happening either,
Yeah.
but all the things like, any of the mindset stuff that you can learn helps turn that volume down, and I
Mhm.
think that that's my main goal with all my clients and my podcast and everything I do. I want people to know you can learn ways to turn that down, and you don't have to believe it, and you
Mhm.
don't have to, have guilt and shame for so
Yeah.
many things.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
I love it too. I am so glad that you're with me today, and I know it's gonna be helpful for people to see the mother-child dynamic because I can talk about it a lot, but, you were here saying the truth about stuff, and I didn't do everything right, but I tried really hard to right the wrongs of my own childhood, and, I'm still learning. I wish I could parent you now all over again the way I was. So I'm just gonna be a surrogate parent to Oliver to teach him all the things that I know now.
Well, yeah.
And I'm so much calmer and emotionally stable and mature. And I haven't I mean, that's just been in the last 5 to 6 years that
Mhm.
I've really become this person. And maybe that's what happens in your 50s. I don't know. Maybe everyone, comes to this, "Oh," place, but yeah, I mean, I feel like everyone's doing the best they can do, and we
Mhm.
can all learn things to just be better.
I think becoming a parent gives you a lot of clarity about how you were parented. And
Mhm.
so then, of course, I think I posted something on Instagram the other day that said, "I don't wanna be a parent that you have to recover from."
Yes.
And so
Yes.
And so I think about that every day with Oliver. Like, I'm
Mhm.
gonna just be the best person that I can be for you. You came to me for a reason. I'm your
Yeah.
mom for a reason.
Mhm.
So
I
yeah,
believe that. I love that.
absolutely.
And some ways of thinking, people say you choose your parents. So, I
Yeah.
don't know. I think that's a little bit it's almost too woo-woo for me, but sometimes I think, I can see the lessons that I needed to learn from my parents,
Hmm.
even though I wasn't parented the way I wished I was parented. And it wasn't bad, it was just not the way I needed to be parented,
Hmm.
but I learned a lot, so I guess
Yeah,
that's good.
I think that's how
Well,
it works.
yes. Well, Haley, thank you for being with us, and maybe in another 3 years, you can come back and tell us some more stuff.
Oh, I can talk for hours. I'm sure
I
I'll.
know. Me too. Thank you.
Yeah.